I was sitting in that courtroom with my heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. Michael, my husband of 6 years, leaned back in his chair with that smug grin plastered across his face. He laughed quietly as he signed the divorce papers, like he had already won some game I didn't even know we were playing. For months, he'd paraded his new relationship around with his co-worker, telling anyone who would listen that he had finally traded up. To him, I was just a naive small-town girl from Tennessee, someone lucky he had ever chosen in the first place. His attorney smirked, his mother whispered something in his ear, and the whole Shannon family seemed to glow with superiority. But they didn't know what I had been building. They had no clue that behind my quiet demeanor, behind the Target dresses they mocked and the modest little job he used to belittle, I had created something far bigger than Michael could ever imagine. The judge adjusted his glasses and shuffled through the paperwork. I could feel the moment approaching, that exact point when Michael's arrogance would finally crack. My fingers gripped the edge of the wooden bench. When the judge cleared his throat and began to read my financial statement, Michael leaned back, ready to smirk again. He thought he knew everything about me. But what he didn't know was that the empire I had built under his nose was about to change everything in that courtroom. I wasn't born into money. In fact, I grew up in a small town in Tennessee where the fanciest restaurant was a family diner that closed at 8 p.m. My parents worked hard, my dad was a mechanic, and my mom cleaned houses, but they always taught me that discipline and saving mattered more than appearances. Michael never understood that. I met him during my last year at Vanderbilt. I was studying accounting, pulling late nights in the library, working part-time just to cover rent. Michael breezed in one afternoon, a confident law student with a tailored suit and a smile that could win anyone over. He leaned against my table and glanced at my textbooks. "You've got potential," he said. "You just need the right guidance." At the time, I thought it was charming. Now, I see it was a preview of what was coming. Michael never saw me as an equal, only as a project. Our romance was fast. He took me to restaurants I could never afford, bought me jewelry, whispered about the life he could give me if I just trusted him. I wanted to believe. So when he proposed after only 18 months, I said yes. His family, the Shannons, didn't hide their opinions. To them, I was the charity case, the sweet little girl from nowhere who didn't belong in their circle of lawyers and executives. At first, I tried to fit in. I changed my clothes, cut my hair, attended their endless social events. But every time I thought I was enough, Michael reminded me I wasn't. He'd make comments about my job, your little accounting gig, or roll his eyes when I talked about my clients. He controlled the money, questioned every purchase, and acted like my paycheck didn't matter. But what he didn't know was that I had always been careful with money. While he burned through credit cards on golf trips and Rolex watches, I quietly started setting money aside. My job gave me access to financial networks most people never saw. I learned about investments, about how small amounts could grow if you placed them right. And I didn't just save, I built. I started freelancing as a financial consultant in the evenings, helping small businesses manage their books, offering investment strategies. My reputation grew slowly, quietly. Word of mouth spread, and soon I had steady clients who trusted me far more than Michael ever did. I kept it all separate. Separate bank accounts, separate LLCs, contracts signed in my maiden name. It was my safety net, my secret world. And every time Michael laughed at me for wasting time with my calculator, I tucked away another piece of security. By our 3rd anniversary, his nights at the office became too frequent. His phone buzzed with messages he hid from me. I wasn't stupid, I knew about the affairs. But instead of falling apart, I doubled down on my work. If he wanted to treat me like I was disposable, fine. I would make sure that when the day came, I would never need a dime from him or his arrogant family. That day arrived sooner than I expected. I found a text message on his phone. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for our next weekend getaway, Redheart." It wasn't even subtle. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just smirked and said, "You'll never survive without me, Sarah. You're nothing on your own." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled and thought, we'll see. And now in that courtroom, as the judge flipped the page to reveal the true size of my financial empire, Michael had no idea what was coming. The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom, calm and matter-of-fact, as he began reading the financial disclosures. Michael barely paid attention at first. He was too busy exchanging smug looks with his attorney, as if this whole proceeding were nothing but a formality. But then the judge paused. He adjusted his glasses and reread the page in front of him. "Mrs. Shannon," he said, his tone shifting, "is it correct that you are the sole owner of Maplewood Financial Consulting, LLC, with assets valued at over $3.2 million? The air in the courtroom seemed to freeze. Michael's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, his face twisting in disbelief. That's not right," he stammered, looking at his lawyer. "She doesn't own anything. She just plays with spreadsheets." I kept my gaze steady, my hands folded calmly on the table. "That's correct, Your Honor," I said. "I am the sole owner. The valuation was completed by an independent auditor last month." The judge nodded and continued. "Additionally, Mrs. Shannon holds significant investments in real estate partnerships, retirement accounts, and diversified funds totaling approximately $5.7 million. Michael's jaw literally dropped. His mother gasped loudly enough for the entire courtroom to hear. His attorney flipped through the paperwork like he was searching for a mistake that didn't exist. I sat there quietly, letting it all sink in. For years, Michael had treated me like a dependent, someone who needed his family name to survive. But the truth was, while he spent money to look rich, I had built wealth that would outlast both him and his pretentious parents. "Your Honor," Michael finally blurted, his voice rising, "this must be fraud. She doesn't have that kind of money. She couldn't possibly." The judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Mr. Shannon, all of these documents have been verified. I suggest you let me finish." His face turned red, but he shut his mouth. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, trying to reconcile the image of me he had always mocked with the reality sitting in front of him. I thought back to all the nights I'd worked quietly after he'd gone to bed, the weekends I spent meeting clients while he played golf, the cautious investments I'd made when he was too busy bragging about his latest Rolex. Every ounce of effort, every sacrifice, had brought me to this moment. And as the judge read on, detailing the extent of my financial empire, I felt something inside me shift. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was reclaiming the dignity he had tried to strip from me. Michael slumped back in his chair, his laughter gone, his arrogance dissolving with every number the judge announced. For once, I was the one in control, and he knew it. But this was only the beginning. The real surprise was yet to come, and I had been waiting years to watch it land. Michael's face was a storm cloud now, dark and restless. He kept whispering frantically to his attorney, who looked just as stunned as he did. Across the aisle, his mother clutched her pearls like she'd just seen a ghost. The judge continued reading. "In addition to her consulting business and investments, Mrs. Shannon owns 51% of a regional logistics company, Southline Transport, with annual revenues exceeding $20 million. Gasps rippled through the room. Michael's father, who had been leaning back smugly just minutes earlier, sat up straight. I could feel his eyes burning into me. The Shannons prided themselves on being a dynasty in Nashville law, but here was their daughter-in-law, a woman they had dismissed as a nobody, suddenly revealed as the majority shareholder of a thriving company. Michael's voice cracked as he finally spoke again. This can't be real. Sarah, what the hell is going on? You were supposed to be." "Supposed to be what?" I asked softly, finally turning to face him. My voice was calm, steady, but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Depend on you? Grateful to wear the ring you dangled like a prize? Too small to ever dream bigger?" His cheeks flushed red. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, realizing there was nothing he could say without making himself look even more foolish. The judge cleared his throat, bringing the room back to order. "I'd like to remind everyone that this is a legal proceeding. If we cannot maintain decorum, I will have to clear the room." Michael's attorney leaned toward him and whispered something that made his expression shift from rage to panic. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. And in that moment, I remembered every little insult. "You're just a small-town girl, Sarah. Don't embarrass me in front of my colleagues. You don't need a career. That's what I'm here for." Every word he had ever used to chip away at me came back like a tide, and now I was standing on solid ground while he was drowning. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low, so only he could hear. "You laughed when you signed those papers, but you didn't realize the judge would be reading mine." His eyes widened, and for the first time since I had met him, Michael had no comeback. I sat back, crossing my legs calmly, while the judge continued outlining the division of assets. Michael had filed this divorce thinking he would walk away victorious, that he'd leave me with scraps while he enjoyed his new life. But instead, the court was recognizing my empire, one that didn't include him. And we weren't even at the final twist yet. I had one more card to play, and it was the one that would break him completely. Michael's panic was almost palpable now. He kept fidgeting with his tie, sweat forming on his forehead despite the icy air of the courtroom. His attorney whispered frantically, flipping through papers, but there was nothing they could find to rescue him. The numbers were real. The documents were airtight. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded, almost serene. This was the moment I had imagined so many nights lying awake in that cold Belmead house, wondering if I would ever escape the weight of his control. I hadn't just escaped, I had surpassed him. The judge moved on, summarizing Michael's disclosures. Mr. Shannon reports assets of approximately $680,000, primarily in real estate, retirement accounts, and personal property. I didn't smirk. I didn't laugh. But inside, the contrast hit me with poetic satisfaction. He had spent years flaunting his family's money, their status, their perfect house in the right neighborhood. And yet, after all his bragging, his assets barely scratched the surface of what I had quietly built on my own. Michael slammed his palm against the table, startling everyone. This isn't fair. She must have hidden this from me. She lied to me our entire marriage. The judge raised his brow. Mr. Shannon, your wife is not legally required to inform you of assets she acquired independently, provided they were not purchased with joint funds. And according to the verified documentation, her businesses and investments were established with her own earnings. Michael's jaw tightened. He turned on me like a cornered animal. So this was your plan all along, to make me look like a fool. I tilted my head, meeting his glare. No, Michael. My plan was to survive. You just gave me the perfect stage to reveal it. A few people in the back actually chuckled before quickly covering their mouths. Even the court clerk, normally stone-faced, hid a small smile behind her hand. Michael's attorney leaned in again, his voice low but urgent. Michael, stop. You're making it worse. But he couldn't stop. He was unraveling. Do you know what this looks like? He hissed at me. Everyone will think I married down. That I settled for some nobody who played me. I leaned forward just enough for him to hear my whisper. Everyone already knows that. You just finally realized it. He froze. His face went pale, his lips trembling as if he wanted to spit back an insult, but couldn't find the words. For years, Michael had relied on power, his family's name, his money, his arrogance, to control the narrative. But now, the truth had stripped him bare. The judge called for a short recess, and as people filed out of the courtroom, I stayed seated. Michael stormed over, ignoring the bailiff's warning look. You think this makes you better than me? He growled under his breath. All this money, all this empire? You'll still be nothing without me. I smiled faintly. Funny, because I built it all while you weren't even looking. He stepped back, stunned. For once, Michael Shannon had no weapons left. No smug smile, no patronizing comment, no upper hand. And he didn't know the half of it. Because I wasn't done. The next revelation wasn't about money at all. It was about betrayal. His betrayal. And I had the receipts. When the recess ended and everyone filed back into the courtroom, I felt a calmness settle over me. The money part had shocked him, yes, but I knew Michael well enough to understand that his pride still clung to some scraps of superiority. He still thought he could spin the story, convince himself that wealth didn't matter as long as he walked out with his new woman on his arm. But I wasn't finished. The judge shuffled the papers again and looked at Michael. Mr. Shannon, there is also the matter of your conduct during the marriage, which may impact the division of assets. Michael straightened, suddenly hopeful. Finally, he muttered, Now, let's talk about her lies. I folded my hands, watching silently as the judge reached for the sealed envelope my lawyer had submitted weeks earlier. My heart beat steady. I had debated for months whether I should include this evidence, whether it was worth airing dirty laundry. But when Michael filed for divorce and gloated about taking me for everything I was worth, the choice became clear. The judge opened the file and began reading. It has been submitted that Mr. Shannon engaged in extramarital affairs with at least 2 co-workers during the marriage. Affidavits from said co-workers, along with corroborating messages and financial records of expenditures, including hotel stays and travel, have been entered into evidence. The courtroom buzzed. Michael shot up from his seat, his face a violent red. Objection. Those are lies. Sit down, Michael. The judge snapped, his voice firm. This is a court of law. These documents include direct screenshots of messages sent from your personal phone. Would you like me to read them aloud for the record? Michael froze. His lips parted, then shut again. For a moment, the great Michael Shannon, the man who always had a speech prepared, looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The judge continued. Additionally, there is evidence of financial misconduct, company credit cards used for personal expenses relating to these affairs. Those funds will need to be repaid. Gasps again. Michael's lawyer put his head in his hands. I sat there, perfectly composed. I hadn't wanted to drag those women into this, but both of them had been willing to sign sworn statements after realizing how disposable they were to Michael. He had promised each of them the world, only to discard them when it suited him. In the end, they wanted their voices heard too. Michael turned to me, his eyes wild. You did this to humiliate me. I met his gaze steadily. No, Michael, you did this to yourself. I just stopped covering for you. The judge cleared his throat again, his tone final. Given the evidence presented, this court will take into consideration Mr. Shannon's infidelity and financial misconduct when finalizing asset division. At this stage, the court sees no grounds for awarding spousal support to Mr. Shannon. In fact, it is more likely he will owe repayment. Michael slumped into his chair, defeated. His family sat in stunned silence. For years, they had looked at me as an outsider, a charity case, someone who wasn't worthy of their name. And now, in front of everyone, their golden boy had been unmasked as both broke and unfaithful. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence of that courtroom was victory enough. But deep down, I knew this wasn't only about money or even justice. It was about reclaiming the years of my life he had tried to steal. My confidence, my independence, my dignity. And as I looked at him slumped over in shame, I realized something profound. I had never really been his victim. I had been preparing for this day all along. The courtroom had gone so still you could hear the creak of the wooden benches whenever someone shifted. Michael sat stiff, his eyes darting from a judge to his parents, then to me. That trademark arrogance, the swagger he wore like a second skin, was gone. His mother leaned forward, whispering furiously, her pearls trembling against her neck. His father sat frozen, jaw clenched, as though trying to calculate how this scandal would ripple through their pristine social circle. I stayed composed, but inside, something strange flickered. Not triumph, exactly, more like release. Years of being belittled, dismissed, treated as less than all of it cracked open in this room, and finally, the truth was visible to everyone. The judge tapped his pen on the desk, continuing. Given the financial disparity between the parties and Mr. Shannon's misconduct, the court sees fit to grant Mrs. Shannon sole ownership of her businesses and investments, with no claim from the opposing party. Furthermore, the court will evaluate reimbursement to Mrs. Shannon for any marital funds misused by Mr. Shannon during the course of his affairs. Michael's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, if I may. No, the judge said sharply. You may not. The evidence speaks for itself. Michael slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? The judge raised his brow. Yes, Mr. Shannon. And I also know who your wife is, a woman who built a legitimate financial empire while you squandered your marriage. Now sit down. The gallery erupted with muffled laughter. Even the bailiff cracked a smirk. Michael's face turned crimson, and for a moment I thought he might actually bolt from a courtroom. I leaned closer, speaking just loudly enough for him to hear. This was never about you knowing who I was, Michael. It was about you underestimating me. His eyes burned into mine, but I didn't flinch. That's when I realized something deeper. Michael wasn't just humiliated, he was terrified. Because everything he had built his identity on, status, family pride, control, was crumbling in front of him. The judge called for a brief adjournment before final deliberations. As the bailiff escorted us out, Michael tried to lean toward me, his voice low, and desperate. "Sarah, listen, we can fix this. You don't want me as your enemy. You need me." I stopped walking, turned to him, and for the first time in years, I let myself laugh. A quiet, sharp laugh that made him flinch. "Need you? Michael, I never needed you. I just stopped pretending." The bailiff motioned us forward, and I walked past him, heels clicking against the polished floor. Behind me, I could hear his shallow breathing, his world closing in. The next session would seal everything. The money, the assets, the betrayal, and one final revelation I had saved for last, the piece that would not just end our marriage, but redefine it forever. When the judge returned and everyone took their seats, the tension was so thick it felt like the air had weight. Michael sat hunched, his tie loosened, his hair damp from nervous sweat. The image of control he loved to project was gone. The judge cleared his throat. "Before I finalize the division of assets, there is one additional matter. Mrs. Shannon has submitted supplemental documentation." Michael's head snapped toward me. "What now?" he muttered under his breath, his voice cracking. I slid a calm glance in his direction. "Just the truth." The judge lifted a set of papers. "It has come to the court's attention that Mrs. Shannon made significant contributions toward the down payment of the marital home. Records indicate the funds did not come from joint accounts, but from Mrs. Shannon's separate consulting income." Michael's attorney paled. "Your Honor, that home is a shared marital asset." "Not if it was purchased primarily with Mrs. Shannon's independent funds," the judge interrupted firmly. "The documentation is clear. 90% of the down payment came from her business earnings. That will be reflected in the ruling." Michael's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked like a fish gasping for air. You tricked me. You let me believe." "No, Michael," I said softly, my voice cutting through the silence. "You assumed, and you never bothered to ask." The gallery stirred again. His mother looked seconds away from fainting. His father pinched the bridge of his nose, as though the entire Shannon legacy was slipping through his fingers. The judge went on. "Therefore, Mrs. Shannon will retain full ownership of the property in Belmead. Mr. Shannon, you will vacate within 30 days. Michael shot up from his chair, his voice breaking. "That's my house. My family's name is on that property. You can't throw me out of my own home." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Sit down. Mr. Shannon, you may have grown accustomed to entitlement, but this court operates on facts, not ego. And the facts show that your wife built this life while you squandered hers." The silence that followed was almost unbearable, for him, at least. For me, it was freedom. I thought back to all the nights in that house where I ate dinner alone, waiting for him to come home from his so-called late meetings. All the times I tried to decorate, only for him to sneer that my taste was too provincial. That house had never felt like mine, until now. Michael sank back down, trembling, his hands gripping the edge of the table, so tightly his knuckles turned white. I almost pitied him, but then I remembered every insult, every humiliation, every ounce of control he had tried to exert over me. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Shannon, is there anything you'd like to add before I finalize?" I paused, inhaling slowly. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the one final revelation that would shatter whatever illusion Michael still clung to. I stood, my voice clear, steady, and stronger than it had ever been. "Yes, Your Honor. There is one more thing." Michael's head snapped up. His eyes widened with dread. He knew I wasn't finished. And he was right. I could feel every pair of eyes in that courtroom turn to me as I stood. My palms weren't sweating. My knees weren't shaking. For the first time in years, I felt entirely steady, as though I had been walking toward this exact moment all along. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "There's one more matter the court should be aware of." Michael's voice cracked before I even spoke further. "Sarah, sit down." "Don't." The judge raised his hand to silence him. "Mrs. Shannon, proceed." I reached into the folder my attorney had prepared and slid forward a second set of documents. These are records of financial transfers from our joint marital account. Transfers that Mr. Shannon made without my consent, funds he used to cover expenses for his affairs. The judge glanced at the paperwork. Hotel stays in Atlanta, weekend getaways to Miami, jewelry purchases, totaling approximately $87,000 over the past 2 years. The air sucked out of the room. Michael shot up, stammering. That's nothing. I'll pay it back. But the judge wasn't done. And there is also evidence confirmed through bank statements that Mr. Shannon attempted to transfer funds into a private account under another name. An account linked to his co-worker. The room erupted in whispers. Michael's face went purple. This is out of context. She's twisting everything. I looked at him calmly. Michael, you filed for divorce thinking you could humiliate me. You laughed because you thought you'd walk away the victor. But all along, you were the one stealing from me. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, Michael Shannon, the man who always had a defense, was completely speechless. The judge tapped his pen. Given this evidence, restitution will be ordered. Mr. Shannon, you are required to repay these funds in full, in addition to any penalties determined by the court. Michael collapsed back into his chair, his hands trembling. His mother covered her face with her hands. His father stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, his expression unreadable. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding with quiet triumph. This wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. For years, Michael had drained me emotionally, tried to drain me financially, too. Now the truth was on record. He hadn't just underestimated me, he had robbed me. And the best part? Justice wasn't mine alone anymore. The court itself had spoken. The judge shuffled the last of the papers and cleared his throat. We will take a short recess before issuing the final ruling. As the gavel came down, Michael turned toward me, his eyes wild, desperate. He leaned close, his voice a harsh whisper, only I could hear. You think you've won. But when this is over, you'll regret everything. I met his gaze without flinching. No, Michael. The only thing I regret is wasting 6 years believing you deserve me. He jerked back as though I'd slapped him. And in that instant I knew, whatever the judge decided in the final ruling, I had already won. When the judge returned for the final ruling, the air in the courtroom felt heavy, like the last seconds before a thunderstorm. Michael sat slumped beside his attorney, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the man who had strutted in that morning, laughing as he signed divorce papers. The judge's voice rang clear. After reviewing the evidence, this court finds no basis for awarding spousal support to Mr. Shannon. Furthermore, restitution for marital funds misuse will be required, totaling $87,000 plus interest. Mrs. Shannon retains full ownership of her businesses, investments, and the marital home, given her primary financial contributions. Divorce is hereby granted. The gavel struck. Final. Absolute. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders releasing tension I hadn't realized I was still carrying. It was over. Michael exploded from his chair. This is a joke. You're destroying me. The judge didn't even look up. No, Mr. Shannon. You destroyed yourself. The bailiff stepped forward, motioning him back. His mother rushed to his side, whispering frantically, while his father sat stone-faced, staring at me like I had just dismantled the empire they'd spent decades building. I gathered my papers, stood, and smoothed my blazer. Michael's eyes locked on me, wide and furious, but beneath the rage I saw something else, fear. Because the truth was out, and no amount of charm, arrogance, or family name could erase it. I walked past him without slowing. For 6 years, I had lived in his shadow, silenced by his arrogance. Today, I stepped into the light, and he couldn't stop me. Outside the courtroom, the afternoon sun hit my face. I stood still for a moment, breathing it in. Freedom. Not just from him, but from the version of myself that once believed I needed his approval to be worth something. My phone buzzed. A message from one of my clients. Congrats on the victory. Drink soon. I smiled. Life was already moving forward. Behind me, I could still hear Michael's voice echoing down the hallway, bitter and broken. But it didn't matter anymore. His laughter had died where mine began. I stepped out of the courthouse, head high. The weight of 6 years finally lifted. I wasn't just divorced, I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was, not his wife, not his project, not his victim. I was Sarah, a woman who built her own fortune, her own future. And this time, the only person I'd ever rely on again was me.